to the Cajun dance and the Zydeco. Filet gumbo and a crawfish pie. Filet gumbo.
Welcome to Literary Gumbo, a continuing look at the world of writers, writing, publishing, and all peripheral events. My name is Fred Klein. I'm sort of the chief stirrer. And my guest today is somebody I've known some time and has probably one of the most interesting stores in town, and I've never had a chance to talk to him about it. This is my friend Eric Kelley, who owns, what the name of the store? Book Den. The Book Den, which is on
Anapamu Street.
Anapamu Street.
Right across from the library.
Right across from the library, absolutely. Welcome, Eric.
Welcome, thank you.
And now the store is celebrating its 85th birthday.
85th birthday of being in Santa Barbara. It's actually been, it was founded in 1902.
Yeah.
So it's just been 85 years since we opened our doors in Santa Barbara.
Wait, where was it before?
It was in Oakland.
Oakland, California?
Yeah.
Then let's go back to first you,
Yep.
and then the store.
Sure.
Because it seems to me you've always been part of Santa Barbara. Were you born here?
No, actually, I was born in Germany. My father was working for the U.S. government.
Oh, really?
Running the school programs for soldiers. So I didn't come to the United States until I was 15 and a half.
Uh-huh.
And that was to Marin County in Northern California.
Yeah.
I went to high school there, went to UCLA for film and television. And when I got out of college...
For film and television?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And when you got out?
When I got out, I spent the summer on the sun deck of my parents' house reading a lot of the books that I thought somebody who was a college graduate should have read, and I hadn't. And then come about September, a friend of mine was quitting a job at the Brentano's bookstore in a nearby shopping mall. He said, "You should go down and get my job." And so I did, and was actually in the toys and games department for my first Christmas. But by the next year, I was the hardcover buyer for the store, and I was hooked on bookselling. And then eventually, about 4 years later, a partner and I bought the Book Den in Santa Barbara, and that's how I came to Santa Barbara.
I see. But in that location, or was it a move from
no, it was in
somewhere?
that location.
So you've been there all that time.
Yeah, basically.
Well, so you were actually in the sort of the developmental throes of the publishing world. I mean, I go back to, I'm back to the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, when the bookstore was a nameless kind of, dropping off point for books. And it took a while. There were certain buyers or certain stores that even the savvy New York publishers realized they should talk to, who had ideas about what books might sell, whatever. But I don't think the attention was ever given to the bookstore until the threats from all the mechanical and technical things that have happened along the way. Tell me about the bookstore as it was and how you see it today.
Okay. I think probably American bookselling changed very little during the first half and plus of the 20th century.
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Yeah, there were the staid New York City publishers. There were some big stores in New York, the Brentanos on Fifth Avenue and the Scribners and so on. So the first shakeup came with chains and shopping centers. And that's the stuff in the 60s and so on where you get B. Dalton. Brentano's became a chain store. That's, the small store I worked in Marin was part of that chain. The second real shakeup was the superstores, the Crown Books and so on, and discounting. Because that was a real threat to a lot of smaller independent bookstores that just, couldn't afford to compete, particularly with discounting. The next one, of course, is Amazon and selling on the internet.
Amazon, the big blow, the big change.
Yeah. And then Amazon plus ebooks. That's been beaten down a little bit.
Because the ebook turned out to be modest, but it never turned out to be the big buster that they hoped for.
Yeah, probably the peak of ebooks was about 40% of the market, and it's down well below 30 now. And they're not going away, but they're just now part of the environment.
It's a percentage, yeah. Like mass market, the world that I was in most of the time. is down about 8 to 10%, and it just keeps on going down.
Yeah, mass market is interestingly, because of all of the parts of publishing, I think mass market has suffered the most to ebooks. It might surprise people, but those paperback romances, and the devout fans read 3 or 4 or 5 of them a week. Well, they read them on their Kindle or their iPad now, and they're not paying $2.95 or $3.95 for them. They're paying 99 cents. So that's the category of all publishing that's been hurt the most by e-readers.
But let's go back. So, but did you sell? I mean, now you are selling current bestsellers in addition to, but most of your business is in.
Used books?
As in used books, yes.
Yeah. Well, it sort of depends on how you quantify it. We sell both, new books, bestsellers, new releases, both in hardcover and paperback. But we've also added a lot of backstock to it. Yeah, because as a used bookstore, you're dependent on what people bring you, right? So the example I always use is on.
Wait, bring you. In other words, all those books I was just telling you I have. Can I bring some to you?
You could. I'm not promising I'll buy them all.
I don't even care if you buy them. I just want you to have them.
Well, that is, of course, one of the dynamics as to why people bring books to used bookstores, because they want these things to find new owners. So that's sort of another subject. But in terms of new books,
No, wait. Stay with that a second, because, for instance, I have a little library, free library, right outside the studio here, and I wanted to fill it up with Spanish and young people's books, because that's the audience I saw for it.
Sure.
So I went over to PJ, what's his name's, the one out on the Mesa.
Right, DJ Palladino.
DJ Palladino.
Yeah.
And I got loads of that stuff. I could have come to you to do the same things?
To get stuff for that?
To get young YA,
well, the trouble
Hispanics,
is we have a hard time getting those things used ourselves.
Yeah, right. You don't get those.
Yeah. And in fact, we are actually stocking new a lot of Spanish or South American or Mexican literature in Spanish. The American publishers are publishing more of that, which makes it easier to get.
The American publishers are publishing more
books in Spanish.
Oh, yeah?
When I was working at Brentano's, we were importing things from Spain and Argentina and so on, and the books were in foreign languages. So the Spanish languages stuff came from South America and Spain. They were very expensive. Now Harper and Row and Knopf and all of these people, if they have a book that they think will sell in Spanish, they publish it in Spanish themselves.
Oh,
it's good.
Yeah. But going back, because it seems to me, again, when I got involved, was the time, and maybe I was just lucky, that the publishing industry was just waking up. I mean, that was just before Jaws and Exorcist and all of those wonderful movie tie-ins, and fortunately we had a lot of them. So I was doing things. I was giving out books on street corners in New York City, or 16-page teasers of stuff. Doing things, the plane, just when you thought it was safe to go in the water, I rented planes to go over beaches. I mean, I did all that razzle-dazzle stuff. And in the mass market, it seemed to be working. I mean, it brought us up from one of the 5 best publishers, most successful, to being the number one. A lot of it was because of editorial judgment. Matter of fact, most of it was.
Well, you had various things going. You had the idea of blockbuster bestsellers, Roots and Jaws and John Grisham and so on. So that so that reading books wasn't just sort of confined to sort of an intellectual elite or whatever. It was mass market. And then you had, of course, the movies made out of them. So a good example for the time is I stared at the poster for Looking for Mr. Goodbar. And it said a Paramount film based on a novel by Simon & Schuster, a Gulf Western production. Gulf Western owned both Simon & Schuster and Paramount. So you got these sort of vertically integrated things, and yes, they all wanted to make it a mass market. It was good for publishing, it was good for reading, it's good for literature.
I got to tell you, I think of it was Leon Uris's Exodus, and I did a poster to be just 10,000 copies distributed all over the country with complete and unabridged. We always, because we were afraid people thought we might have left something out. The L in complete was left off, and it took 1 year before anybody discovered the fact that we had dropped that L. Nobody had paid any attention to it. But those were the exciting times. I still think they were the golden times of publishing, because that's also when we started to get into hardcover, when we realized that that also began cultivating certain aspects of the reading public.
Yeah. So I got into bookselling at Brentano's in 1974.
One of the great names, Brentano's.
Yeah. It's been ever evolving since then. And, my own business has too. When I bought it, it was basically a used bookstore. We sold a few things like the Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. You'd always be out of it. So the previous owners, they had that. And there were a few other backstock things, and that was basically about it.
Had in stock.
And so then I added like a table for the trade paperback new releases. And it was just one table, but it worked pretty well. And people would.
How long ago was this?
That was probably 1987 or 1990, something like that.
Okay, all right.
And people would compliment me on the selection. Well, I was just reading the bestseller list in the LA Times.
In the LA Times, not the New York Times.
Not the New. Well, no, we're in California.
Yeah,
we're different. Anyway, it was a very modest dipping my toe into new book selling. And it was basically when Borders and Barnes & Noble left within a week of each other, that there was nobody else selling general new books downtown. And so that was a big shift. It was an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And as it happened, a man that I had known for years and years, Mike Moore, who had been a manager for Barnes & Noble and other places, and was sort of easing his way out of management by being the receiving manager at the local Barnes & Noble. Well, he was out of a job, and I needed somebody who knew the new book business, and so I hired him as my new book buyer. He's still with me, 8 years later.
Great.
And
because I've been here, so I've bought some books from you, in spite of the library right across the street.
We have a nice.
And you do have a good selection of contemporary bestsellers.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. It's fun to be able to play with all the pieces.
But also, look, I've been interested mostly in the way today's bookstores carry not just books. I mean, they become more than a reason for one-stop shopping. When did that start happening?
Sidelines, probably with audiobooks, because audiobooks and CDs and stuff like that. Although, even at Brentano's that long ago, we sold, reading glasses and lap pillows that could hold
but
things.
I'm talking about, coffee.
Coffee shops. I think one of the first of them, at least in California.
Children's stuff. I'm thinking of expanding items for the audience. I'm a little bit ill-equipped because it's not something we do a lot of. My shop is pretty small. We used to have occasional art gallery shows, and we would sell paintings and photographs and so on. Well, you also First Thursday is an important thing to you.
Sure.
Which I want to talk
when First Thursday started out, we would do that. But then eventually I said, what? I need more room for books, and so I had to put books on all of the empty walls, so we don't do art shows anymore. Because literally, we're stuffed in the sense that we've got bookshelves on every wall. So we don't do sidelines very much. But, I think Barnes & Noble, because they have these huge stores now, and they can't fill them with books because they can't sell enough books, they're selling all kinds of things. One of the weirder ones was they were selling crock pots.
Crock pots?
Crock pots, yes.
Oh, that is a funny one. So now, did you get, for instance, you're talking about used books. Now I bring up, you'll excuse me, but since I'm leaving town, I went through my library and I found 3 books that are relatively not in bad condition. 25 cents. This goes back 50, 75 years ago. Aren't they worth anything because they're so old?
The old part is probably not too much of a thing because these were popular titles, and you wouldn't believe how many people saved them. You would think that most of these had gone into the trash. So you've got.
But I mean, 25 cents for Great Gatsby.
Yeah,
And it's complete and unabridged.
Well, the Gatsby is the best of these because it is in the best condition.
I also have A Catcher in the Rye, but the cover is off, so I wouldn't even bring it in because I'm sure you want it in mint condition.
Okay. So, Fred, you being a really good book person, you picked 3 great authors and titles.
I deliberately
and so on. But in terms of paying a real premium, like more than $5 or $10,
yes,
there isn't a customer for them.
Yes, I'm salivating. Yes.
No, I mean these are things. These are because of the condition, not things that the real collectors would buy. And it's condition. This is the thing where somebody says, "Oh, honey, look at that cute copy of Great Gatsby." And they'll plunk maybe $5 or $10 down for it. Even because this is Kerouac, it's not his most important book, and it's in pretty bad shape, but I could probably get $5 or $10 for that, but I can't get $00 for any of these. There are things, I mean, maybe
wow.
I'm sorry to let you down.
Dude, I guess I'm going to have tuna fish tonight. Okay, if that's the way you feel, I'm going to take my books and I'm going home. But now let's talk about electronics and how you mentioned it first, how it has influenced, I think, the whole publication world.
Oh, sure. Well, there are 2 ways that the electronic revolution and computing and so on, internet has affected. One is how books are delivered. You now have an option of ebooks. And you can also read blogs, and you can read newspapers and magazines online, and so on. So that was one wave. And then the other effect, which I think most people don't realize, but I think is a bigger effect, is just all of the information that's available online. So this has changed what publishers publish, what sells, and what we buy and sell in the used book business, because you can do reference and information searches online. So if you want to make chicken cacciatore, you do not have to go buy a cookbook. You just go on Food Network or whatever.
But there are cookbooks that are
oh yeah, sure they are. Well, so what the difference is now, we have sort of superstar chefs and brand names. Those cookbooks still sell, but a cookbook that is just a collection of recipes, that's the kind of thing that got beat out by the internet. Art books, monographs. If you want a picture of Van Gogh's Starry Night, you can go on Google Images and see it. You don't have to buy a book. The kind of art book that does sell now is something like what Yale University Press publishes, or the Museum of Modern Art, with a really good scholarly text, and probably on some subset of the artist's work, rather than a survey of the whole thing.
What about movie tie-ins? I got involved with movie tie-ins, and they were a big thing. Certainly for regular mass market publishers.
Yeah, movie tie-ins work pretty well for trade paperbacks now.
Yeah, it seems to be.
Because you can get $15, $17 for them. And they're generally books that are already out, but there's a paper, a new cover for it.
But you get audiences. I mean, the kids now. I don't think of your store in kids. How many kids walk into your store?
Actually, quite a few.
Yeah.
Good. I think it's a myth that young people don't read. And, we're a downtown bookstore. Maybe you would think that a suburban bookstore would do better, but we actually don't have any suburban bookstores here.
Yeah.
Chaucer's, I'm sure, has lots of young people, too. And then we have tourists, and then we have people of our age group. But kids still read.
But do you get many tourists?
It's probably at least half our business.
But again, I guess here's where that first Thursday comes in, or here's part of the Thursday.
Yeah, first Thursday.
That's marketing.
Sure. It's you're getting yourself out.
Who started that? I mean,
that was the downtown. That was the downtown organization. It's more than 10 years ago. I was actually on the board when they started it. I wasn't on the committees that actually did it, but it really started because the galleries wanted to have a gallery crawl, and so they wanted, rather than doing it themselves, they thought, well, if we can work with the downtown organization, and it'll have a broader benefit for downtown businesses. So originally it was only galleries that participated, and the idea was, well, I'm next to Sullivan Goss. If I stay open that night, it will help me, and that is still true as of last Thursday. But eventually, they needed more participants. And so the idea was that they would open it up to other kinds of businesses and nonprofits and so on. But you had to have some sort of an event. You can't just like open your doors. So like when I do it, like next, the first Thursday in May, we're going to have the people from Weeping Willow Press, Marcia, and all of her authors.
You're going to have Marcia Meyer, and her crew?
And her whole crew, yeah. You know, Dick Jurgensen and Guy Clark and so on. So that's the way we still participate in it. But we've done other things too in terms of tourism. Well, one of the aspects of tourism now is the cruise ships.
Yeah,
right?
which was here yesterday. One was here yesterday.
Yeah. And so, again, just because I was on the board of the downtown organization, I sort of got clued into that early. And for a while, when I had more time, I used to actually go and volunteer at the tables down there when the people get off the ship.
That table,
there are all these tables,
underneath
and
that
they hand out
tent,
literature. Yeah. And, you know, Santa Barbara does a very good job of making it
promoting
easy.
it.
Yeah, well, making it easy for people to get downtown and so on. So yeah, I get a noticeable bump when there's a cruise ship in town. But, you know, I advertise in the sort of map guide that gets handed out all over the place, and the visitor's guide that people can get through the mail if they're planning on coming to Santa Barbara.
And when we did our Book and Author Festival, you
always
bought tables.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And that for me, I mean, yes, we sold some books, but it was mainly a marketing exercise. Yelp and things like that, because bookstore people, they go to bookstores when they travel. They, you know, because bookstores are all different.
Well, you know, you're in a sense you're the only game in town, certainly Midtown town.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
absolutely.
It's basically us, Chaucer's, and Tecolote as far as new books. And then there's Lost Horizon Bookshop and Randall House, and there are a few other antiquarian booksellers too. But when I'm
so the antiquarian, what percentage of the business would you say you're antiquarian?
Less than 5%.
Half?
No, less than 5%. Well, used, I mean, antiquarian is something expensive and collectible, less than 5%. The rest of it is basically we're about half and half dollar-wise, new books and used books. But there are more used books in it because they're cheaper.
Okay.
You know, but that's a mix that works really well for us because people can come in if we have a really good copy used book, then they got a deal. They got it at half price, right?
And everything, and your merchandise is there. It's not hidden in the back room or whatever.
No, everything's on the show. We don't have a big enough back room to store anything. Also, everything in the store is on our website. And so we get this a lot. People, you know, they, you know, someone out in Goleta, you know, they look online and they go, oh, I want that book, and they come downtown and they buy it. So our website sells not only all over the world, but all over our area.
Do you do any special promotion, though? I mean, I know you have done author appearances.
We have
usually local.
Yeah, but we have actually in early May. I can't remember the exact date, but we have Jacqueline Winspear coming, which I'm really looking forward to. The mystery writer. So she and her husband have a summer house or whatever in Ojai.
But does she have a book coming out shortly?
It just came out last week. It's one of the Maisie Dobbs ones.
The next guest is we're going to be talking about the Writers' Conference, and she would be perfect for the Writers' Conference. Winspear. But she said she only spends her summers in
Yeah, they live in Northern California otherwise. But she will be just finishing her book tour for this latest book.
I noticed that it just came out.
So, she was in the store, and we had talked before. She's a delightful woman. And so I asked about doing an event, and she said, well, I'm pretty much booked, but I would really love to do it. So then I got an email from her publicist and saying, well, how about the second week of May?
Oh, that's great.
And I'm really happy to have her.
And did she say anything about the fact that she was part of a group of, you know, the publicity? What do you call it? I'm trying. I suddenly can't come into words. Never mind.
Okay.
But that's great. So you're keeping up and you're developing. And if there is, as I'm hoping, going to be a revival of the Book and Author Festival, it's still, I mean, it was one of the few ways of concentrating in one area, people interested in books and all aspect of it.
I even did them a couple of times myself way back in the 80s.
And so
aimed more at just local booksellers. It wasn't so much the writing and publishing end. It was just because there were, in the early 80s, there were 21 used bookstores.
Oh, yeah.
in between Carpinteria, Goleta, and Santa Barbara. And a lot of other people who sold online and went to shows and so on. So we did one on the 1200 block of State Street and one on Anapamu Street. But as you well know, it's a lot of work.
Yes. But you're also close to the library, which has suddenly got a whole new lease on life in terms of marketing and promotion. And watch them to do some exciting.
No, the foundation they have, I think, is really
Yeah.
So interestingly, the library has something to do with why the Book Den is where it is. Because the guy who bought the store on the death of a previous owner when it was in Oakland, the guy who brought it to Santa Barbara was Max Richter. He'd spent some of his childhood in Mission Canyon. His family owned a lot of property there. And he wanted to come back to Santa Barbara. So this is on a personal history tape that the Natural History Museum has. So he came to Santa Barbara in either late 1932 or early 33. He walks up State Street looking for a place to rent, to move his bookstore to. He comes to Anapamu Street and sees that the ground floor of the Oddfellows building is for rent, and it's right across the street from the library. And he thinks that's a good location.
Great.
And that's where he moved it to, and where we've been ever since.
And we
85 years.
And we are now through. We are now through. It's just I was hoping that we get that. We are just getting the tail end of the story. Well, anyhow, Eric, thank you. And 85 years to have lasted 85 years and to be in such good condition as it is now. I wish you 85 more.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I won't be around to see it, too.
I won't either, but anyway, delighted to spend time with you. I'm really glad that we got this chance to talk.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing.
Gumbo